Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye stands as a monumental work in American literature, marking the debut of a writer whose voice would come to resonate powerfully across decades. First published in 1970, the novel tackles deeply uncomfortable and essential themes surrounding race, beauty, identity, and trauma through the story of Pecola Breedlove, a young Black girl in post-Great Depression Ohio. The narrative confronts the devastating effects of internalized racism and societal standards that define beauty exclusively through whiteness. The blue eyes that Pecola longs for become a haunting symbol of desire, rejection, and self-destruction. The Bluest Eye is often noted for its lyrical prose, its complex structure, and its unapologetic exploration of painful truths, which has sparked both critical acclaim and controversy. Its unflinching portrayal of incest, poverty, and racial self-loathing has led to it being banned or challenged in some schools. Yet it remains a vital and revered text for its insight into the psychological impact of systemic racism. As we journey through this story, we will explore not just Pecola's tragic tale, but the broader portrait Morrison paints of a community grappling with despair, hope, and the quest for dignity. Now, let us step into the world Morrison creates, a world both specific in its setting and universal in its emotional reach. Beginning with the first part of this profound novel, the story opens with a haunting and poetic reflection by an omniscient narrator who names the year as 1941. This date anchors the narrative firmly in a time when America was emerging from the shadows of the Great Depression and edging toward global war. But within the small Black community in Lorain, Ohio, the scars of economic hardship and racial discrimination remain deeply etched. The narrator immediately draws our attention to Pecola Breedlove, a fragile 11-year-old girl who is central to the novel's tragic arc. Pecola is not like the other children. She is seen as ugly, dirty, and unwanted. But Pecola's ugliness is not merely a matter of physical appearance. It is a reflection of how the society around her has judged and diminished her, leading her to believe that possessing blue eyes like the white girls on TV and in magazines, would make her beautiful, loved, and accepted. The narrative structure of The Bluest Eye is unique and layered, blending multiple perspectives and time frames. This opening part introduces us to the Breedlove family, a fractured unit defined by dysfunction and suffering. Pecola's father, Collie Breedlove, is a man broken by his own experiences of abandonment, racism, and a sense of emasculation. His violence and anger frequently spill over into the family's fragile dynamics. Pollen, Pecola's mother, retreats into a world of television and servitude as a maid for a white family, distancing herself emotionally from her children and internalizing the ideals of white beauty. The Breedlove home itself is depicted almost as a prison, a place of shame and hardship where the family's poverty and despair seem insurmountable. We are also introduced to the community and its complex social interactions. The neighbors and townsfolk, while bound by shared race and economic status, participate in a collective psychology that values white standards of beauty and success. The The idea that to be beautiful means to have blue eyes is a toxic mythology that has infected even the children. Morrison's prose is striking here. The language is rich and vivid, sometimes lyrical, at other times raw and unsettling, making us feel the weight of Pecola's yearning and the crushing reality she faces. Through the eyes of Claudia MacTier, a young Black girl who narrates some sections, we witness an alternative perspective. Claudia is Pecola's contemporary, and her voice brings innocence, but also critical insight. Claudia rejects the white beauty ideals and resists the societal norms that alienate Pecola. Her narrative segments create a contrast to Pecola's internalized self-hatred, providing a glimpse of resilience and a different kind of understanding of identity. Yet even Claudia's world is not untouched by the pervasive standards imposed by a society that privileges whiteness. As part 1 unfolds, Morrison masterfully weaves memory and present-day scenes, exploring the past experiences of various characters and how these shape their current realities. The story hints at the deeper traumas beneath the surface, events that explain Collie's bitterness, Pauline's emotional withdrawal, and the community's collective pain. We see how Pecola's longing for blue eyes is not just a childish wish, but a desperate grasp for survival in a world that constantly devalues her existence. The atmosphere is one of suffocating oppression, but also of fragile hope. The neighborhood is alive with the sounds and rhythms of everyday life, yet the emotional undercurrents reveal a more complicated reality, one where dreams are constrained by racism, poverty, and the scars of history. By the end of this first part, we have a profound sense of the novel's tragic trajectory. Pecola's innocence is under threat, and the world around her seems ill-equipped to protect or nurture her. As we prepare to move into the next part of the story, we will delve deeper into Pecola's experiences at school and the evolving dynamics within her family, exploring the ways in which identity, desire, and violence intertwine in this heartbreaking narrative. The story deepens as we follow Pecola Breedlove's daily life and the world that shapes her fragile sense of self. School becomes a crucial stage where the harsh realities of rejection and invisibility play out vividly. Pecola is painfully aware of her difference, the way her dark skin, crooked teeth, and unruly hair mark her as less than the white girls who seem to glide effortlessly through the halls, admired and desired. The schoolyard is no sanctuary, but a battlefield where children, even at such a young age, enforce the brutal rules of beauty and belonging. Pecola's classmates taunt and exclude her, reinforcing her feelings of worthlessness. The whispered cruelty and outright insults make clear that Pecola's longing for blue eyes is more than a fantasy. It is an attempt to escape a world that refuses to see her as beautiful or worthy. Meanwhile, the novel shifts focus to Pauline Breedlove, Pecola's mother, illuminating the source of much of the family's dysfunction. Pauline's story reveals a woman trapped between conflicting desires and harsh realities. She grew up in the South, where strict racial hierarchies and poverty shaped her worldview. The memories Morrison shares are tender, but tinged with sorrow. A young Pauline yearning for affection and recognition, only to encounter neglect and violence. These early experiences haunt her, coloring her adult life with bitterness and resignation. When Pauline moves north, and becomes a maid in a white household. She finds a strange comfort in serving a family that embodies the very beauty standards she both envies and internalizes. Their orderly home, filled with cleanliness and quiet, contrasts sharply with the chaos and neglect she endures at home with her own family. Here, Pollen's identification with whiteness and its ideals deepens, further alienating her from Pecola and her other children. She measures her own worth, and by extension, that of her family, against the impossible standards imposed by a society that elevates whiteness and shuns blackness. The novel also reveals the emotional distance Pollen maintains from Pecola. To Pollen, Pecola's ugliness and failure to conform to white ideals represent not just personal flaws, but a kind of punishment or curse. Pollen's harshness towards her daughter is not simply cruelty. It is the tragic expression of a woman wounded by her own pain and sense of powerlessness. This emotional neglect compounds Pecola's isolation, leaving her vulnerable to the pressures and violence that will later engulf her. Simultaneously, Morrison paints a complex portrait of Pecola Breedlove, Pecola's father, whose tragic past explains much of his present anger and destructiveness. Kali's story is recounted with a mix of sorrow and horror, tracing his childhood experiences of abandonment and abuse. Abandoned by his parents and subjected to racism and humiliation, Kali grows into a man who struggles with identity and belonging. His inability to connect emotionally with others is rooted in the deep scars left by a world that has repeatedly rejected him. One of the most harrowing moments in the novel reveals Kali's encounter with a white couple who, rather than offering kindness, humiliate him with cruel racial violence. This episode crystallizes the systemic racism that has shaped Kali's life and personality. The degradation he suffers leaves him broken and angry, unable to form healthy relationships. Morrison does not excuse his violent behavior, but she invites readers to understand it as a symptom of profound trauma and social injustice. The Breedlove household itself is a physical manifestation of the family's dysfunction and despair. The house is described with harsh, unloving imagery, a place that is not a home, but a symbol of failure and decay. The walls are stained, the furniture threadbare, and the air heavy with neglect. The environment mirrors the Breedlove's emotional landscape, a prison of poverty and hopelessness that traps each member in a cycle of pain. As Pecola's story unfolds within this setting, Morrison shifts between the external world and Pecola's inner life, revealing the devastating effects of internalized racism and self-loathing. Pecola's desire for blue eyes symbolizes a longing not just for beauty, but for love, acceptance, and escape from the relentless rejection she experiences. She believes that if she had blue eyes, the world would treat her differently, her family would love her, her peers would admire her, and she would finally be seen as worthy. The novel also introduces the perspective of Claudia MacTier and her sister Frietta, who live nearby and serve as a kind of narrative counterpoint to Pecola. Claudia's voice, at times innocent and defiant, offers a glimpse into another way of seeing the world. Claudia resents the white beauty ideals imposed on her and her community, refusing to idolize the blue-eyed dolls that represent everything rejected by her own culture. Her resistance highlights the novel's exploration of identity and the possibility of self-acceptance amid societal pressures. However, even within Claudia's world, the insidious nature of racism and colorism is evident. Claudia and Frieda's family faces their own struggles with poverty and social marginalization. Yet, their ability to question and resist the dominant culture's standards hints at hope and resilience that contrast sharply with Pecola's tragic trajectory. The narrative also brings forward the voices of other characters in the community, each adding depth to the portrayal of the collective experience. Their stories reveal how the ideals of beauty and worthlessness are not confined to Pecola's family, but are pervasive, shaping the lives of many. These intertwined stories enrich the novel's tapestry, demonstrating that Pecola's tragedy is both intensely personal and a reflection of broader social wounds. As the story progresses, the tension between hope and despair grows more pronounced. Pecola's yearning for transformation clashes violently with the harsh realities surrounding her. The novel's language captures this tension beautifully, sometimes tender and poetic, other times raw and brutal, drawing readers into the emotional heart of the story. The section closes with an unsettling sense of foreboding as the pressures bearing down on Pecola intensify. Her vulnerability and isolation deepen, setting the stage for the heartbreaking events that will follow. Morrison's narrative invites empathy without pity, urging us to see Pecola not as a victim defined solely by her suffering, but as a complex human being shaped by a world that has failed her. In this part of the novel, Morrison's exploration of family, community, and identity grows richer and more nuanced. The interactions among characters reveal the intricate ways in which trauma, love, and societal expectation intertwine. The Breedlove story is a microcosm of the larger themes Morrison examines: the devastating impact of racism, the corrosive power of beauty standards rooted in whiteness, and the human need for belonging and recognition. As we move further into the novel, we will witness the consequences of these forces on Pecola's life and psyche, and the ways in which the community's silence and complicity contribute to her tragic fate. The story continues to delve deeper into the lives around Pecola Breedlove, revealing the complex emotional landscape of the community and how it shapes the lives of those within it. At the heart of this exploration is Claudia MacTier, whose perspective provides both innocence and insightful critique of the society that marginalizes Pecola. Claudia's reflections are raw and honest. She resists the cultural obsession with white beauty, particularly the idolization of the fragile, blue-eyed dolls that adorn so many Black girls' playrooms. To Claudia, these dolls are symbols of exclusion, impossible standards that communicate a painful message. Beauty, worth, and love are reserved for those who look like the white children who possess these prized objects. Claudia's resistance to these dolls stands as a powerful rejection of the internalized racism that Pecola has succumbed to. Where Pecola wishes to embody the ideal of blue eyes and fair skin, Claudia actively despises the symbols that perpetuate such ideals. This contrast highlights one of the novel's central tensions: the struggle between self-acceptance and self-loathing in a society obsessed with white beauty standards. Claudia's narrative is layered with complexity because she, too, feels the sting of societal rejection, but finds ways to assert her identity despite these pressures. The story then moves to examine the role of the community itself, a network of neighbors, friends, and extended family who watch Pecola's suffering, but often remain silent or powerless to intervene. The community's response to Pecola is ambivalent at best, and sometimes cruelly complicit. Some view Pecola as an unfortunate, pitiable figure, while others distance themselves, unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truths her story reveals. This collective silence is a key element of the novel's tragedy, underscoring how societal neglect and denial contribute to the perpetuation of pain. Within this environment, the idea of beauty as a form of currency gains further prominence. Morrison illustrates how beauty and desirability influence social status and relationships, especially for Black women and girls. Pecola's yearning for blue eyes is not merely about physical appearance, but is tied to her hope for love, acceptance, and dignity, things that seem forever out of reach in her world. This longing becomes a haunting symbol of how deeply racism and colorism damage individual identity and self-worth. The narrative also offers a closer look at the complicated figure of Sophed Church, a self-styled spiritualist and ex-preacher who embodies hypocrisy and manipulation. Sophed Church is an enigmatic and unsettling character whose own fractured identity and desire for control mask deeper insecurities and delusions. When Pecola turns to him, desperate for a way to change her appearance, his interactions with her are chilling and reveal the exploitation lurking beneath his purported wisdom. Sophed's role in the story is a stark reminder of how vulnerability can be preyed upon by those who cloak themselves in authority. Morrison uses Sophed Church's character to critique not only individual moral failings, but also broader societal failures, how spiritual and cultural systems can be co-opted and corrupted, leaving the most vulnerable exposed to harm. His willingness to indulge Pecola's wish, but on his own terms, reveals a perverse form of control that ultimately deepens her tragedy. As the story moves forward, the narrative shifts between the external world of community and family and Pecola's inner life, which becomes increasingly fragile and disjointed. Pecola's fantasy of possessing blue eyes transforms from a simple desire into an all-consuming obsession, reflecting the depth of her alienation and despair. The novel's prose here becomes almost dreamlike, blurring the lines between reality and hallucination, emphasizing how Pecola's mind retreats from the pain of her everyday existence. Throughout, Morrison's language captures the poignancy and horror of Pecola's experience. The narrative voice moves with grace and precision, sometimes gentle and poetic, sometimes stark and unflinching. This shifting tone mirrors the instability within Pecola herself and invites readers to engage emotionally with her journey rather than view it from a detached distance. Parallel to Pecola's deteriorating mental state, Morrison continues to develop the stories of other characters who offer different perspectives on identity, beauty, and belonging. Claudia and Frieda's family, for example, provide a contrast in how a supportive environment can foster resilience. While their family faces hardship and discrimination, there is warmth and love that cushions them from complete despair. These glimpses of hope and solidarity enhance the novel's exploration of community, showing that even amid systemic oppression, human connection remains vital. Yet, the novel does not shy away from exposing the fissures within this community, how poverty, racism, and internalized oppression strain relationships and breed conflict. Morrison shows that no individual is untouched by these forces, and that even love and protection can be complicated by fear and misunderstanding. This nuanced portrayal invites readers to see the community as both a source of support and a contributor to individual suffering. As the narrative draws closer to the climactic moments, the pressure on Pecola mounts relentlessly. Her family life grows increasingly volatile, with tension and violence simmering beneath the surface. The emotional neglect and abuse she suffers at home compound her isolation, leaving her no refuge. Morrison's portrayal of this domestic turmoil is unsparing and painful, revealing the devastating impact of trauma on a child's psyche. At the same time, the novel's exploration of memory and trauma deepens. Characters' recollections of past pain interweave with present events, demonstrating how history reverberates through generations. The cyclical nature of abuse, neglect, and racial violence becomes clear, suggesting that Pecola's story is not an isolated tragedy, but part of a broader pattern of suffering rooted in systemic injustice. The tension between reality and fantasy escalates as Pecola's psychological state becomes increasingly unstable. Her retreat into a world where she possesses the blue eyes she so desperately craves is both heartbreaking and haunting. Morrison's prose conveys the fragility of this fantasy and the brutal consequences of its collision with reality. This section also intensifies the novel's meditation on language and storytelling. Through the shifting perspectives and narrative styles, Morrison challenges readers to reconsider how stories are told and whose voices are heard. The fragmented structure reflects the fractured identities of the characters and the complexities of their experiences. By giving voice to characters who are often marginalized or silenced, Morrison disrupts dominant narratives and invites empathy and understanding. As the emotional stakes rise, the novel's atmosphere becomes charged with an uneasy tension, a sense that tragedy is imminent. The final threads of hope and innocence unravel, leaving readers to confront the full weight of Pecola's suffering. Morrison does not offer easy answers or redemption, but instead presents a raw and honest portrait of a world shaped by cruelty and neglect. Ultimately, this part of the story deepens our understanding of the forces shaping Pecola's life and psyche, the intersecting impacts of race, gender, poverty, and trauma. Morrison's masterful storytelling draws us into the intimate, painful realities of her characters, making their struggles feel immediate and real. The narrative challenges us to see beyond surface appearances and consider the human cost of societal ideals that exclude and devalue. As the story progresses, it becomes clear that Pecola's fate is tied not only to her own desires, but to the failures and complicity of the community around her. Morrison's unflinching exploration of this dynamic forces us to reflect on the ways society shapes identity and the devastating consequences when love and recognition are withheld. The narrative now shifts toward the Breedlove family, peeling back the layers of dysfunction, pain, and desperation that define their existence. Morrison offers an unflinching look at the fractured home life that shapes Pecola's world, revealing the deep wounds that afflict her parents, Pollen and Collie Breedlove, and how those wounds echo through their daughter's fragile psyche. Pollen Breedlove's story is told with a mix of sorrow and quiet resignation. Once a young woman who dreamed of beauty and dignity, she has become trapped in a life marked by hardship and self-loathing. Her dissatisfaction with her own appearance and her status in the world leads to a painful disconnect from her family. Pollen's work as a housekeeper for a white family represents a complex blend of escape and submission. While it offers a refuge from her own life's disappointments, it also enforces a humiliating power dynamic that deepens her internalized oppression. Within the walls of the white household where she works, Pollen is almost transformed. She adopts a rigid attention to cleanliness, order, and appearance that contrasts sharply with the disorder of her own home. In this environment, she finds a twisted form of validation and self-worth. The white family's expectations shape her sense of value, and she embraces this role with a fervor born of desperation. Yet, this transformation highlights the insidious nature of racial and class hierarchies, how they demand conformity and sacrifice from those on the margins. Back at home, Pollen's attitude toward her family grows colder and more detached. Her relationship with Pecola is strained, marked by neglect and occasional bursts of harshness. Pollen's inability to nurture her daughter reflects not only personal failings, but also the crushing weight of societal expectations and disappointments. She projects her frustrations onto Pecola, whose physical appearance becomes another source of shame for her. This dynamic further isolates Pecola, who longs for love, but finds only rejection in her own home. Collie Breedlove, Pecola's father, is a figure of intense complexity and tragic contradictions. Morrison's portrayal of Collie moves beyond simplistic villainy, revealing a man shaped by a lifetime of trauma, abandonment, and rage. His story is told through a series of fragmented memories that illuminate the sources of his anger and self-destructive behavior. Born into poverty and subjected to cruel treatment from an early age, Collie's childhood is marked by abandonment and abuse. His first experience of racial humiliation, witnessed during a forbidden interracial encounter, shatters his sense of self and sets the stage for his later turmoil. This formative event, charged with both tenderness and cruelty, encapsulates the painful contradictions of a world defined by racial oppression. As Collie grows older, he drifts through life, unable to establish stable relationships or find a sense of belonging. His marriage to Pollen is fraught with tension and violence, a reflection of his own inner chaos and unresolved trauma. Morrison does not excuse Collie's behavior, but invites readers to understand the deeper wounds beneath his brutality. His actions are a tragic manifestation of the ways systemic racism, poverty, and fractured family structures can warp and damage individuals. The Breedlove home itself is a powerful symbol of the family's brokenness. Described in bleak terms, the house is small, dark, and dilapidated, mirroring the emotional desolation of its inhabitants. It is a place where love and hope struggle to survive, suffocated by neglect and despair. Morrison uses vivid imagery to evoke the claustrophobia and decay that permeate this space, underscoring the connection between physical environment and psychological suffering. Within this environment, Pecola's growing isolation becomes palpable. She is caught in a liminal space, a child longing for love and acceptance, but surrounded by forces that deny her both. Morrison's narration captures the intensity of Pecola's loneliness and her increasing retreat into fantasy. Her fixation on blue eyes deepens, becoming a desperate attempt to rewrite her reality and escape the relentless pain of rejection. The novel also explores how the Breedlove's dysfunction intersects with larger cultural narratives about race, beauty, and identity. Pauline's internalization of white beauty standards and her desire to fit into the role imposed on her by society contribute to the family's fragmentation. Collie's rage and despair are shaped by a world that offers him few options for dignity or redemption. These intersecting forces illustrate how systemic racism operates not only through external oppression, but also by shaping intimate relationships and self-perceptions. Morrison's storytelling here is marked by a profound empathy for her characters, even as she exposes their flaws and failings. She refuses to reduce them to mere victims or villains. Instead, she presents them as deeply human, struggling within a harsh and unforgiving world. This nuanced portrayal challenges readers to consider the complexities of blame, responsibility, and survival. As the story progresses, the tension within the Breedlove family escalates. Collie's drinking and violent outbursts create an atmosphere of fear and instability. Pauline's withdrawal into her work and her growing bitterness leave Pecola increasingly unprotected. The cumulative effect of these dynamics is a tragic unraveling as the family's dysfunction spirals out of control. This section also delves into the theme of silence and its consequences. The Breedloves are a family marked by a profound inability to communicate or express love in healthy ways. Their unspoken pain festers beneath the surface, leading to actions that further isolate and harm each member. Morrison's exploration of this silence reveals the ways trauma can become cyclical and self-perpetuating when left unaddressed. Throughout, the narrative continues to interweave multiple perspectives, providing a richer understanding of the characters and their struggles. The voices of Claudia and Frietta, as well as the community members, contrast with the Breedlove's bleak existence, offering glimpses of resilience and hope even amid suffering. These narrative shifts highlight the diversity of experiences within the Black community and the different ways individuals respond to oppression and hardship. Morrison's prose remains evocative and haunting, blending poetic description with raw emotional honesty. Her use of imagery and symbolism deepens the novel's exploration of beauty and pain, identity and alienation. The Breedlove family's story becomes a powerful lens through which readers can examine the devastating effects of racism, poverty, and familial dysfunction. As the narrative builds toward its climax, the stakes for Pecola become increasingly dire. Her desire for blue eyes, once a distant fantasy, grows into an obsession that consumes her identity. Morrison's portrayal of this psychological descent is both heartbreaking and illuminating, revealing the catastrophic impact of societal rejection on a vulnerable child. This part of the novel leaves readers with a profound sense of sorrow and urgency. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the costs of systemic injustice and the ways in which society's failures become deeply personal tragedies. Through the Breedlove story, Morrison underscores the necessity of compassion, understanding, and the recognition of humanity in all its complexity. The narrative now moves deeper into the heart of Pecola's tragic world, focusing on the escalating consequences of her yearning for the elusive blue eyes that have come to symbolize so much more than mere physical beauty. It's a yearning that has been planted and nurtured by a society that relentlessly equates worth with whiteness. A society that whispers and shouts that to be beautiful, to be seen, loved, and valued, one must possess features utterly foreign to Pecola's own. This fixation on blue eyes transcends superficial desire. It becomes a desperate cry for recognition, for acceptance, for a place in a world that has made her invisible. Pecola's life continues to unravel amid the indifference and cruelty of those around her. At school, she remains painfully isolated, the subject of scorn and ridicule from her peers. The girls mock her worn clothes, her dark skin, and her awkward mannerisms. Pecola is painfully aware of her difference, but she is unable to articulate the depth of her pain or find comfort in anyone. The school environment reflects the broader societal values that marginalize and exclude, perpetuating cycles of self-hatred and alienation. Despite this, Pecola's longing for blue eyes grows ever more consuming. She retreats further into fantasy, imagining that possessing these eyes would allow her to transcend the limitations imposed on her by race, class, and family. She envisions blue eyes as a magical key that will unlock love and kindness from a world that has otherwise shut its doors to her. This vision is both heartbreaking and deeply revealing, exposing the corrosive power of internalized racism. At home, the situation deteriorates even more. Pecola Breedlove's drinking worsens, and his violent tendencies become increasingly dangerous. Pollen, exhausted and emotionally withdrawn, offers little protection for Pecola. The family dynamic is one of chaos and fear, a stark contrast to the safety and affection that a child should experience. Pecola's vulnerability grows exponentially, and she becomes prey to forces, both within and outside her family. The narrative shifts between multiple perspectives, weaving together the experiences of Pecola, her parents, and members of the community to paint a fuller picture of the harsh realities they all inhabit. Morrison's storytelling technique, which moves fluidly between voices and points of view, emphasizes the interconnectedness of their fates and the shared burdens of trauma and oppression. Claudia and Frietta continue to serve as contrasting figures in the story. Their voices provide a counterpoint to Pecola's suffering, embodying resilience and sisterhood. Yet even they are not immune to the pervasive influence of societal beauty standards. Their initial revulsion toward Pecola's appearance and their inability to fully understand her pain highlight the deep wounds inflicted by racialized ideals of beauty and worth. The community itself is depicted as both a witness to and participant in Pecola's tragedy. Neighbors gossip about the Breedloves and Pecola, often with judgment and cruelty. There is a collective silence, an unwillingness or inability to intervene that speaks volumes about the ways in which systemic neglect and racial trauma fracture communal bonds. Morrison explores the theme of complicity, how silence and inaction contribute to the perpetuation of harm. One of the most devastating moments in this part of the story is the depiction of Kali's abuse toward Pecola. This act, both shocking and deeply tragic, serves as a grim climax to the mounting tension within the family. It shatters any remaining illusions of safety and love for Pecola, marking the final descent into a world of despair. Morrison's portrayal is unflinching yet compassionate, refusing to sensationalize or simplify the event, but rather framing it as the tragic result of cycles of violence and trauma. Pecola's psychological response to this abuse is complex and harrowing. Rather than breaking her spirit completely, the trauma pushes her further into her fantasy of blue eyes. It becomes a protective mechanism, a way to cope with unbearable pain. The eyes she longs for are not just a symbol of beauty, but a desperate wish to see herself as worthy, to escape a reality that has been defined by rejection and harm. The novel also continues to explore the devastating effects of internalized racism through other characters, particularly Pollen. Her own story reveals the ways in which racial self-loathing and societal pressures distort personal identity. Pollen's fixation on the white family she serves, her devotion to their standards of cleanliness and order, and her emotional distance from her own children highlight the pervasive impact of cultural domination. She enacts a version of submission that is both survival strategy and self-betrayal, demonstrating how systems of oppression compel individuals to betray themselves and those they love. Meanwhile, Kali's backstory is fleshed out further, revealing the traumas that have shaped his violent tendencies. His childhood experiences of abandonment and racial humiliation create a foundation of rage and helplessness. Morrison invites the reader to see Kali not merely as a villain, but as a deeply damaged human being, scarred by forces beyond his control. This portrayal challenges simplistic moral judgments and calls for a deeper understanding of how systemic injustice breeds personal devastation. Throughout this section, Morrison's prose remains poetic and evocative, richly layered with symbolism and metaphor. The recurring motif of eyes, blue eyes in particular, takes on a haunting resonance. They represent not only the unattainable ideal of beauty, but also the desire to be truly seen, to have one's existence acknowledged and validated. Pecola's quest for blue eyes is a powerful metaphor for the universal human need for love and acceptance, tragically distorted by racialized notions of worth. The community's failure to protect Pecola and the Breedlove family at large speaks to broader themes of societal neglect and the invisibility of Black suffering. Morrison highlights how institutions, families, and individuals all play a role in either perpetuating harm or offering sanctuary. In this world, love and safety are scarce commodities, and those who most need them are often the least likely to receive them. As Pecola's mental state deteriorates, the novel builds toward a haunting climax. Her retreat into fantasy becomes complete, blurring the lines between reality and imagination. Morrison's sensitive and powerful portrayal of Pecola's psychological collapse is a searing indictment of a society that fails its most vulnerable members. Yet, even amid this darkness, the narrative is suffused with a profound empathy. Morrison does not present Pecola as a helpless victim, but as a deeply human figure, caught in a web of forces beyond her control. yet still deserving of compassion and understanding. Her story becomes a mirror reflecting the devastating impact of racism, poverty, and familial dysfunction, while also revealing the resilience and complexity of human spirit. This portion of the novel reinforces the urgent need for a more just and compassionate world, one in which children like Pecola can be loved and accepted for who they are, rather than made to feel invisible or unworthy. Morrison's story is a call to recognize the humanity in everyone, to dismantle the oppressive systems that inflict such profound harm, and to heal the wounds of a society that has long turned away from its most vulnerable. The story continues to unravel the profound fractures within Pecola Breedlove's world, focusing more intensely on her psychological unraveling and the increasingly desperate measures she takes to escape the unbearable realities of her life. The blue eyes she so fervently desires have transformed from a mere fantasy into an all-consuming obsession, an escape hatch from the pain, shame, and rejection that seem to suffocate her at every turn. Pecola's retreat into this fantasy is both heartbreaking and deeply symbolic. It is not simply about physical appearance, but about the yearning to be seen, to be loved, and to matter in a world that has consistently told her she does not. Morrison deftly portrays how this desire is shaped by a society that equates beauty with whiteness, and how the internalization of this standard distorts self-perception. For Pecola, blue eyes become the ultimate symbol of acceptance, an imagined magic that would transform her existence and shield her from the cruelty she faces. In the community around her, reactions to Pecola's plight are complex and multifaceted. Claudia and Frietta, the narrators who have offered a window into childhood innocence and resilience, continue to observe Pecola with a mix of empathy and confusion. Their own experiences of growing up in a harsh world have taught them to be wary and protective, yet they remain outsiders to Pecola's inner torment. Their voices add layers to the story, illuminating how even those who care are often powerless to intervene. The adults in the community offer a different perspective, one often marked by judgment, denial, or resignation. The Breedlove family, in particular, exists under a cloud of shame and secrecy. Pauline Breedlove's bitterness and emotional withdrawal reflect the crushing weight of her own disappointments and the societal expectations placed upon her. Her complicated feelings toward her family, her husband Kali, and her daughter Pecola reveal a cycle of pain and neglect that seems impossible to break. Pauline's devotion to the white family she works for, where she finds some semblance of pride and order, contrasts sharply with her inability to nurture her own children, underscoring how systemic racism warps personal identity and relationships. Kali's continuing descent into violence and self-destruction is another tragic thread that Morrison explores with compassion and insight. His past trauma, a history marked by abandonment, humiliation, and racial violence, shapes the man he has become. Through flashbacks, readers gain a glimpse into his fractured childhood and the moments that seeded his anger and alienation. Yet Kali is neither excused nor condemned in simplistic terms. Instead, Morrison offers a nuanced portrait of a man damaged by circumstances far beyond his control, trapped in a cycle of rage and despair. The community's response to Kali's behavior reflects a painful ambivalence. Some see him as a cautionary figure, while others avoid him out of fear or indifference. This ambivalence speaks to a broader societal failure to address the root causes of trauma and violence within marginalized communities. The Breedlove household becomes a microcosm for these larger dynamics, a space where love and safety are scarce, and pain is passed from one generation to the next. As Pecola's psychological state worsens, her fantasies of blue eyes become more vivid and all-encompassing. She begins to believe, with a fragile certainty, that the transformation she longs for is possible. This belief is both a protective shield and a heartbreaking indicator of her detachment from reality. Morrison's portrayal of Pecola's mental disintegration is tender yet unflinching, inviting readers to witness the devastating impact of neglect, abuse, and internalized racism. Within this context, the motif of eyes, especially the blue eyes Pecola craves, gains even greater significance. They symbolize not just beauty, but the power to be truly seen and acknowledged. In a world where Pecola has been invisible and ignored, these blue eyes represent a kind of salvation. Yet this salvation is tragically unattainable, highlighting the cruelty of the ideals imposed upon her. The narrative also revisits Claudia's perspective, offering moments of reflection and insight. Claudia's voice contrasts with Pecola's, grounding the story in a more hopeful, though still complicated, view of childhood and identity. Claudia's struggles with the same societal pressures and standards underscore the pervasive reach of these forces. Yet her ability to question and resist these norms hints at the possibility of resilience and change. The role of family and community is further examined as Morrison delves into the complexities of love and survival. The Breedloves are shown to be caught in a web of systemic oppression and personal failures, but their story also reveals the ways in which these forces shape behavior and relationships. The novel challenges readers to look beyond simple judgments and consider the deeper contexts of trauma and survival. The increasing isolation of Pecola is palpable. Her peers reject her, the adults around her fail to protect or understand her, and her family offers little comfort. This isolation compounds her suffering and pushes her further into her fantasies. The reader feels the crushing weight of loneliness and despair that defines her existence. Morrison's prose continues to be lyrical and evocative, weaving imagery and metaphor seamlessly into the narrative. The use of sensory details, the sights, sounds, and smells of the community, and the Breedlove household immerses the reader in the world Pecola inhabits. These details enrich the story, making Pecola's pain and longing all the more tangible. The story's emotional intensity builds steadily as Pecola's fate becomes increasingly precarious. The community's collective failure to intervene or offer support is a powerful critique of social neglect and the invisibility of Black suffering. Morrison's storytelling compels readers to confront uncomfortable truths about the intersections of race, beauty, poverty, and trauma. Yet, despite the darkness, there remains a thread of humanity and compassion running through the narrative. Pecola's story is not just one of victimhood, but also a poignant exploration of hope and longing. Her fantasy of blue eyes, while tragic, also reveals a deep yearning for love and acceptance that resonates universally. This portion of the novel deepens the exploration of themes such as internalized racism, the destructive nature of imposed beauty standards and the ways in which trauma perpetuates itself across generations. Morrison's ability to depict these themes with nuance and empathy is a testament to her literary mastery. As the narrative moves toward its climax, the tension between reality and fantasy, despair and hope, becomes increasingly fraught. Pecola's fragile grasp on reality threatens to break, and the consequences of this breakdown ripple outward, affecting everyone around her. Through her evocative and unflinching portrayal of Pecola and her family, Morrison challenges readers to recognize the devastating human cost of racism and neglect. The story serves as a powerful call to empathy, understanding, and social change. The story deepens into the heart of Pecola Breedlove's tragic unraveling, drawing readers ever closer into the shattering impact of a world that refuses to nurture her. Pecola's longing for blue eyes, those emblematic tokens of beauty, worth, and acceptance, has now become a haunting fixation, a desperate hope tethered to a fragile grip on reality. She clings to this fantasy not only to escape her pain, but to construct a fragile identity in a world that repeatedly tells her she is invisible, ugly, and unlovable. The community around Pecola remains a complex backdrop, one where love, resentment, silence, and judgment intertwine. Morrison's narrative does not shy away from revealing the uncomfortable truths about the ways this community both shapes and fails Pecola. The other children, including Claudia and Frietta, are caught between innocence and awareness, witnessing Pecola's descent, yet unable to fully intervene. Their voices provide a poignant contrast while they wrestle with their own understanding of race, beauty, and identity. They also retain a spark of youthful hope that Pecola seems to have lost. Morrison uses Claudia's perspective to emphasize the deep contradictions in how Black children navigate societal pressures. Claudia's own rebelliousness toward white beauty standards, symbolized in her hatred of white dolls, contrasts sharply with Pecola's internalization of those very standards. This juxtaposition highlights the devastating effects of systemic racism on self-esteem and community relations. Claudia and Frietta's protective instincts emerge more strongly here, underscoring the loneliness that Pecola endures. They are not merely observers, but empathic witnesses to a friend slipping away, caught in a vortex of trauma and neglect. At the same time, Morrison delves further into the Breedlove family dynamics, illuminating the layers of dysfunction and sorrow. Pauline Breedlove's character grows more complex. As her retreat into the white world, she serves contrasts with her harsh treatment of her own family. She finds a certain dignity and order in her role as a domestic servant to a white family, a stark contrast to the chaotic, loveless environment she maintains at home. Pauline's fixation on cleanliness, appearances, and order in her employment starkly contrasts with the neglect and bitterness that permeate her marriage and motherhood. Collie Breedlove's tragic backstory unfolds with greater intensity in this section. Morrison reveals the layers of abandonment, humiliation, and abuse that have scarred him since childhood. His early experiences, being left alone in the woods, witnessing the absence of love, and suffering racial violence, have left indelible wounds. These flashbacks illuminate how his destructive behaviors are rooted in deep trauma, complicating any simplistic judgment of his actions. His subsequent relationship with Pauline is marked by alienation and anger, exacerbated by the harsh realities of poverty and racism. The intimate and painful exploration of Collie's character underscores one of Morrison's key themes: the cyclical nature of trauma and violence. The Breedlove household is a space where wounds are passed down and compounded rather than healed. Morrison's portrayal challenges readers to consider the social and historical contexts that shape individual suffering, moving beyond blame to understanding. Pecola's own experiences within this fractured family continue to deteriorate. The abuse she endures, particularly the horrifying incident at the hands of her father, shatters whatever fragile stability remained. This moment is depicted with a careful yet unflinching honesty, capturing the devastating impact of sexual violence on a young, vulnerable child. Morrison does not sensationalize this trauma. Instead, she presents it as a tragic culmination of the intersecting forces of neglect, powerlessness, and societal failure. The community's reaction, or rather, its silence and avoidance around this abuse, highlights the pervasive denial and helplessness that surround Pecola's plight. No one steps forward to protect her. Instead, rumors, gossip, and judgment circulate quietly, reflecting a collective unwillingness to confront painful truths. This silence is a damning indictment of the failures of community and social structures to safeguard their most vulnerable members. Pecola's mental state begins to fracture completely after this trauma. She increasingly withdraws into her fantasy world, where possessing blue eyes becomes not only a wish, but a means of psychological survival. The blue eyes symbolize a transformative power, one that would erase her suffering, render her visible, and bestow upon her the love and respect she has been denied. This fantasy, while heartbreaking, becomes her refuge, a place where she can momentarily imagine a life free from pain. Morrison's language here is lyrical and haunting, weaving imagery that evokes the fragility and despair of Pecola's psyche. The novel's recurring motif of eyes, the ability to see and be seen, takes on profound significance. Pecola's yearning for blue eyes is a metaphor for the broader societal refusal to acknowledge the humanity and beauty of Black girls like her. In this way, Morrison critiques the destructive power of white beauty standards and the deep scars they inflict. Simultaneously, Morrison revisits the perspectives of Claudia and Frietta, whose attempts to comprehend and support Pecola reveal the complexities of childhood empathy. They struggle to articulate the depth of Pecola's suffering, caught between their instinct to protect her and the harsh realities they face. Their friendship with Pecola is marked by both compassion and confusion, underscoring the difficulty of navigating trauma at such a young age. The narrative also expands to consider the broader cultural context of beauty and identity within the African American community. Morrison explores how internalized racism manifests in the characters' attitudes and behaviors, creating tensions and divisions. The pressure to conform to white standards of beauty is not just an external force, but an internalized one, shaping the self-worth and relationships of the community members. This theme resonates throughout the novel, emphasizing the pervasive impact of systemic racism. As Pecola's fantasy grows more consuming, the novel builds toward its tragic climax. Morrison masterfully sustains the tension between hope and despair, reality and illusion, creating an emotional crescendo that is both painful and profoundly human. The readers are drawn into Pecola's inner world, experiencing her desperation and longing firsthand. Despite the overwhelming darkness, the narrative is suffused with moments of tenderness and empathy. Morrison's portrayal invites readers not only to witness Pecola's suffering, but to understand it within a broader social and historical framework. The novel becomes a powerful meditation on the intersections of race, gender, poverty, and trauma, urging compassion and critical reflection. Through this deeply moving section, Morrison challenges the audience to confront uncomfortable truths about societal complicity in the marginalization and destruction of vulnerable individuals. Pecola's story is a tragic indictment of the ways in which systemic forces silence and invisibilize those who most need to be seen and heard. As the narrative moves forward, the fragility of Pecola's mental state, the weight of family trauma, and the complexities of community response intertwine to create a richly layered portrait of suffering and resilience. Morrison's storytelling is at once poetic and unflinching, compelling readers to engage with difficult themes through a lens of empathy and understanding. As the story unfolds further, the disintegration of Pecola Breedlove's sense of self grows more acute, a heartbreaking descent into a world shaped by alienation and despair. Pecola's longing for blue eyes becomes less a simple wish and more a desperate, fragile coping mechanism in a life marked by neglect, abuse, and the erasure of her identity. The novel's layers deepen, showing not just Pecola's personal tragedy, but how her fate is intertwined with the broader failures of family, community, and society. Pecola's retreat into fantasy is portrayed with haunting poignancy. The blue eyes she desires symbolize far more than physical beauty. They represent visibility, acceptance, and a claim to humanity denied her by her environment. Morrison's narrative carefully unpacks this yearning as a metaphor for the devastating effects of internalized racism and the painful desire to be seen as worthy and loved. Pecola's mental fragility exposes the corrosive impact of societal standards that elevate whiteness and white beauty as the ideal, a cruel yardstick that devalues blackness and obscures its inherent worth. The Breedlove household itself continues to unravel, with each member trapped in their own cycles of pain and despair. Pauline Breedlove's character grows more complex and tragic. Her internalized shame and bitterness are palpable as she clings to the order and perceived dignity found in her role as a domestic servant in a white family's home. There, she escapes, in part, from the harsh realities of her life with Collie and their children. Yet this escape only deepens her alienation from her own family as she exacts her frustration and resentment on them with cold discipline and neglect. Collie Breedlove's violent outburst, his act of abuse toward Pecola, remains a focal point for understanding the corrosive effects of generational trauma and systemic racism. Morrison gives Collie's backstory the weight it deserves, revealing the scars of abandonment, humiliation, and violent encounters with racism that have shaped him into a broken, angry man. His inability to love or protect his family stems from wounds inflicted long before, embedded deep within the social fabric of racism and poverty. This tragic history complicates the reader's response, urging a recognition that cycles of violence are often born from unseen and unresolved pain. The community's response, or its tragic lack thereof, to Pecola's suffering is telling. Silence and avoidance echo through the neighborhood, illustrating a collective failure to confront painful realities. Morrison subtly critiques this social dynamic, exposing how the refusal to acknowledge or address trauma allows it to fester and grow. Pecola becomes an invisible victim, her pain known yet unspoken, a secret kept out of shame and fear. Meanwhile, Claudia and Frieda's narrative voices provide a sensitive, youthful counterpoint. Their confusion and sorrow at Pecola's fate reveal the challenges of childhood empathy. They try to protect Pecola in small ways, but the limits of their power and understanding are painfully clear. Their presence in the story reminds readers of the innocence lost and the resilience that persists despite trauma. Their perspectives also highlight the contradictions in how children are taught to navigate race, identity, and beauty, caught between societal pressures and their own budding self-awareness. Morrison's prose here is both lyrical and stark, weaving imagery that evokes the fractured nature of Pecola's reality. The novel's recurring motifs of eyes, vision, and seeing resonate deeply. Pecola's fixation on acquiring blue eyes is not merely about physical appearance, but about the desperate hope to be seen differently, to be acknowledged, valued, and loved. This yearning touches on universal themes of belonging and self-worth, while firmly rooted in the specific historical and cultural context of African American experience during the 1940s. The narrative also explores the broader cultural landscape, showing how ideas of beauty and identity are policed not only by dominant white society, but within the Black community itself. Morrison examines how internalized racism influences characters' attitudes and relationships, fostering divisions and insecurities. This internal conflict is painful and pervasive, shaping the characters' lives in profound ways. As Pecola's mental state deteriorates, Morrison does not shy away from portraying the harrowing consequences of trauma. Pecola's psychological break is depicted with empathy and realism, underscoring the need for compassion and understanding rather than judgment. The novel captures the terrifying loneliness of mental illness compounded by social isolation and neglect. Pecola's retreat into a world where she believes her blue eyes have finally come to life is tragic, but also a testament to the power of hope and imagination as survival mechanisms in the face of unbearable pain. Amidst this darkness, Morrison's storytelling remains deeply humanizing. She invites readers to see Pecola not simply as a victim, but as a symbol of larger systemic failures, racism, poverty, and gender oppression that shape individual lives and communities. Pecola's story is a mirror reflecting the consequences of societal neglect and cruelty, compelling the audience to reckon with uncomfortable truths. The relationship between Claudia and Frieda and Pecola also deepens here, revealing the nuances of friendship, loyalty, and the limits of protection. They stand as witnesses to Pecola's suffering, their youthful voices offering moments of tenderness amidst the harsh realities. Yet their inability to prevent the tragedy underscores the insufficiency of personal goodwill in the absence of broader social support and change. Morrison's exploration of family dynamics further enriches the narrative. The Breedlove's dysfunction, shaped by poverty, racial trauma, and emotional neglect, is portrayed with unflinching honesty. The cycles of pain passed from one generation to the next reveal the urgent need for healing and understanding. The novel suggests that individual suffering is inseparable from collective history and community conditions. As the story builds toward its inevitable conclusion, the tension between hope and despair tightens. Pecola's psychological escape into the fantasy of blue eyes becomes a haunting symbol of the human desire for transformation and acceptance. Morrison's portrayal of this fragile hope is both heartbreaking and profound, capturing the tragic beauty of a child's yearning to belong in a world that rejects her. The narrative also leaves room for reflection on the power of storytelling itself. Morrison's voice, blending lyrical beauty with brutal honesty, transforms Pecola's tragedy into a larger meditation on race, identity, and the enduring human spirit. The novel's structure, shifting between perspectives and timelines, deepens this effect, allowing readers to engage with multiple facets of the story and its themes. Through this deeply affecting section, The Bluest Eye challenges readers to confront the harsh realities faced by those marginalized and silenced by society. Pecola's story becomes a call to recognize the humanity in all individuals and to resist the destructive ideals that marginalize and harm. In this way, the novel remains a powerful and relevant work, speaking across generations about the intersections of beauty, race, trauma, and resilience. Morrison's narrative is an urgent reminder that the damage wrought by prejudice and neglect can be profound, but that empathy and understanding hold the potential for healing and change. As the story moves closer to its heartbreaking conclusion, the emotional and psychological landscapes of the characters become more tangled and intense, revealing the full weight of the traumas that have been accumulating throughout the narrative. The fractured world of Pecola Breedlove grows darker and more tragic, while the quiet reflections of Claudia and Frietta offer a poignant counterbalance, a fragile thread of childhood innocence attempting to hold on amidst the wreckage. Pecola's mental state, increasingly fragile and withdrawn, becomes the focus of a sorrowful meditation on the devastating effects of neglect, abuse, and societal rejection. Her fantasy of possessing blue eyes, so much more than just a wish for physical beauty, grows into a desperate, all-consuming delusion. Morrison depicts this descent with remarkable empathy and nuance, allowing readers to see Pecola's pain not as mere pathology, but as a heartbreaking response to a world that refuses to see her as valuable or whole. The community's indifference and silence are as much a part of the tragedy as the personal failures of Pecola's family. The neighborhood's unwillingness to intervene or offer meaningful support highlights a collective failure that is both painful and infuriating. Morrison's narrative makes clear that Pecola's isolation is not simply the result of individual circumstances, but a reflection of the broader social dynamics at play. The stigma and shame surrounding her family's dysfunction act as barriers to help, perpetuating a cycle of invisibility and neglect. The Breedlove family itself continues to unravel in increasingly visible ways. Pauline's retreat into her role as a domestic servant for a white family further distances her from her own children. Her sense of self-worth becomes bound to this external validation, yet it isolates her emotionally and deepens the fracture within the family. Her harshness toward Pecola and her older son, Sammy, becomes a reflection of her own internalized pain and bitterness. Morrison paints Pauline's character with a careful balance of critique and compassion, showing how systemic racism and poverty shape her actions and limit her capacity for love. Pecola Breedlove's tragic backstory is revisited and expanded in greater detail here, allowing readers to understand the roots of his anger, confusion, and eventual violence. His early experiences of abandonment and racial humiliation are presented with brutal honesty, illustrating how the dehumanizing effects of racism extend far beyond the surface. These layers of trauma compound to create a man who is deeply broken, yet also deeply human. Morrison's portrayal refuses simplistic condemnation, instead urging a complex, empathetic response to Collie's actions. Pecola's own story is deeply intertwined with this family history, underscoring how individual suffering is shaped by generational wounds and social conditions. The novel's exploration of inheritance, both genetic and cultural, adds a profound dimension to the tragedy. Pecola's yearning for blue eyes is not just a personal desire, but a symptom of these broader forces, an attempt to transcend a history marked by pain and invisibility. Claudia and Frieda continue to serve as the novel's moral and emotional anchors. Their attempts to protect Pecola and understand her plight offer moments of tenderness and hope, even as they grapple with their own confusion and fear. Their childhood perspectives provide insight into the ways young people begin to make sense of complex issues like race, beauty, and self-worth. Their voices are infused with a mixture of innocence and emerging awareness, capturing the bittersweet transition from childhood to adulthood. Morrison's prose during this section is particularly powerful, blending vivid imagery with lyrical language that captures both the beauty and brutality of the characters' experiences. The recurring motif of eyes and vision takes on an almost mythic quality, symbolizing the desire to be seen and the pain of being overlooked or rejected. Pecola's fixation on blue eyes becomes a tragic metaphor for the destructive power of societal ideals and the yearning for acceptance that lies at the heart of human experience. The community's complex dynamics come further into focus, revealing tensions between individuals and within families that complicate notions of solidarity and support. Morrison exposes the internalized racism and colorism that permeate the neighborhood, showing how these attitudes fracture relationships and contribute to the marginalization of characters like Pecola. The narrative critiques not only the external forces of oppression, but also the ways in which communities sometimes perpetuate these harmful standards. In this section, Morrison also delves deeper into themes of identity and self-perception. The characters' struggles to define themselves in the face of conflicting cultural messages are portrayed with nuance and sensitivity. Pecola's tragic quest for blue eyes is contrasted with Claudia's resistance to these ideals, highlighting different responses to the same oppressive beauty standards. Claudia's rejection of white beauty norms serves as a powerful counterpoint, emphasizing the possibility of resilience and self-acceptance despite societal pressures. The the emotional intensity of the narrative continues to build, drawing readers into the inner worlds of the characters. Pecola's psychological unraveling is depicted with a rawness that evokes profound sympathy and sorrow. Her descent into a delusional belief that she finally possesses the blue eyes she desires is both tragic and haunting, symbolizing the ultimate escape from a world that has been unbearably cruel. The role of memory and storytelling remains central in this part of the novel. Morrison's shifting narrative perspectives and temporal jumps deepen the sense of a fragmented reality, mirroring the characters' fractured identities and histories. The act of remembering becomes both a source of pain and a means of understanding, highlighting the complexity of healing from trauma. As the narrative approaches its climax, the tension between despair and hope is palpable. Pecola's story becomes emblematic of larger social failures, but it also points toward the urgent need for empathy, recognition, and change. Morrison's work challenges readers to confront uncomfortable truths about race, beauty, and the human cost of systemic oppression. Ultimately, this part of the novel underscores the profound impact of neglect and silence. Pecola's tragedy is a testament to the consequences of invisibility, how the denial of love and acknowledgement can fracture a person's sense of self beyond repair. Morrison's portrayal is unflinching but deeply humane, insisting on the necessity of compassion and understanding in the face of suffering. The narrative closes this section with a somber yet reflective tone, inviting readers to consider the enduring legacies of pain and resilience within marginalized communities. Through the interwoven stories of Pecola, Claudia, Frietta, and the Breedlove family, Morrison crafts a powerful exploration of the intersections of race, identity, and trauma that continues to resonate with readers. As the story reaches its devastating conclusion, the threads of sorrow, innocence lost, and harsh reality intertwine with an unbearable weight. Pecola Breedlove's world, already fragile and fractured, collapses under the unbearable pressure of rejection, abuse, and societal invisibility. The novel does not shy away from this heart-wrenching descent, but rather confronts it with an unflinching honesty that demands the reader's empathy and reflection. Pecola's final psychological retreat into the fantasy that she now possesses the blue eyes she has longed for is both a tragic escape and a haunting symbol. The blue eyes, once an emblem of white beauty and social acceptance, become a symbol of self-annihilation and the destruction wrought by systemic racism and internalized self-hatred. In her mind, Pecola achieves the impossible. She is seen, she is beautiful, and she belongs. But this vision is not a triumph. It is a desperate refuge from the brutal reality that has otherwise excluded and abused her. The community's response to Pecola's breakdown is telling. Instead of rallying around her with care and protection, she is further marginalized and whispered about, becoming a ghost in the neighborhood, visible only through rumor and silence. This communal failure is Morrison's indictment of a society that perpetuates cycles of violence through neglect and denial. Pecola's tragedy is not an isolated case, but a reflection of the broader social landscape that devalues Black girls and women, elevating narrow and destructive standards of beauty and worth. The Breedlove family, torn apart by poverty, abuse, and emotional neglect, stands as a microcosm of this societal collapse. Pauline's growing emotional distance and Collie's violence and despair leave their children bereft of love and stability. Sammy, Pecola's older brother, drifts away, symbolic of the fractured family's disintegration. The family home, a place that should offer safety, becomes a site of terror and invisibility, underscoring the ways domestic spaces can mirror the wider world's dysfunction. Claudia and Frietta, in contrast, remain the moral center of the narrative, embodying the resilience and resistance that can arise even in the bleakest circumstances. Their reflections on Pecola's fate are tinged with a mixture of guilt, confusion, and sorrow. They remember their childhood innocence slipping away as they confronted the cruelty of their world. Yet, their continued presence in the story offers a glimmer of hope, an affirmation that love, understanding, and defiance of harmful societal norms are possible. The narrative structure itself, shifting between voices and times, emphasizes the fragmented nature of memory and trauma. Morrison's choice to interweave multiple perspectives, including those of Claudia, Pecola, and even Pauline, creates a tapestry of experience that reveals the complexity behind each character's pain. This multifaceted storytelling challenges readers to hold contradictory emotions, compassion and frustration, sorrow and anger simultaneously. A key theme that culminates powerfully here is the destructive impact of internalized racism and colorism. Pecola's yearning for blue eyes is the tragic embodiment of a beauty standard that valorizes whiteness and dismisses blackness. Morrison does not present this desire as mere vanity. It is the symptom of a society that teaches Black children to despise themselves and see their natural features as flaws. This theme resonates deeply throughout the novel, urging a critical examination of how cultural narratives shape identity and self-worth. The novel's closing scenes are stark and painful. Pecola's mental break is complete. She lives in a delusional state where the blue eyes have transformed her life. Yet this transformation is a cruel illusion, a symptom of psychological disintegration rather than healing. Morrison's depiction of this breakdown is raw and compassionate, making it impossible for readers to view Pecola as anything other than a victim of overwhelming forces beyond her control. The story's final reflections invite a broader consideration of how society responds to trauma and difference. Pecola's tragedy is a call to recognize the ways in which collective neglect, racism, and distorted ideals of beauty contribute to personal destruction. It challenges readers to question their own perceptions and the cultural standards that sustain harm. Throughout the novel, the motif of sight and vision operates on multiple levels: the physical, the psychological, and the societal. Pecola's quest for blue eyes symbolizes a desperate desire to be seen as valuable, to be recognized and loved. Yet, paradoxically, the very society that enforces these standards denies her visibility and humanity. Morrison's use of this motif invites deep reflection on the power of seeing and being seen, and the devastating consequences when this basic human need is denied. In the aftermath of Pecola's collapse, Claudia and Frietta's voices return to remind us of the resilience of those who survive. Their childhood memories serve as a testament to the enduring impact of trauma, but also to the possibility of resistance and healing. Their ability to reject the damaging beauty ideals and to cherish their own identities offers a subtle but powerful hope amid the darkness. The novel closes not with resolution, but with an open-ended reflection on pain, identity, and the enduring struggle for self-acceptance in a world rife with injustice. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye is a profound meditation on the intersection of race, beauty, and trauma. It confronts uncomfortable truths while affirming the humanity of those who suffer beneath oppressive social structures. Ultimately, The Bluest Eye challenges readers to confront the costs of systemic racism, not only the overt violence, but also the quiet, insidious ways it shapes self-perception and community dynamics. It is a call for empathy, for seeing beyond surface appearances, and for acknowledging the complex legacies that shape each individual's experience. The novel's lasting impact lies in its unflinching portrayal of pain and its insistence on the possibility of compassion and change. As you close the pages of this story, you carry with you the weight of Pecola's dreams and the echoes of her shattered innocence. Morrison's narrative lingers, haunting and vital, a reminder that true beauty is not something to be imposed or desired from outside standards, but something deeply rooted in acceptance, love, and the courage to see oneself and others fully and without judgment. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye is more than just a story about a young girl's desperate wish for blue eyes. It is a profound exploration of identity, beauty, and the deep scars left by racism and societal rejection. Through Pecola Breedlove's heartbreaking journey, Morrison exposes the destructive power of internalized hatred and the devastating consequences when a community fails its most vulnerable. The novel challenges us to rethink the standards by which we measure worth and to recognize the ways in which systemic oppression shapes not only society at large, but the very way individuals see themselves. The Bluest Eye forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about colorism, family trauma, and cultural invisibility. But it also offers moments of resilience through the voices of Claudia and Frieda, reminding us that survival and self-acceptance are possible, even amid pain. Morrison's storytelling is both tender and unrelenting. She invites us to feel, to question, and ultimately, to act with greater empathy and awareness. As we reflect on this powerful narrative, we are reminded that beauty should never be dictated by narrow, exclusionary ideals. True beauty is found in embracing difference, nurturing self-love, and standing against the forces that seek to diminish our humanity. The Bluest Eye remains a timeless, vital work that continues to resonate because it holds a mirror to society's deepest flaws while offering a hopeful call for change. Thank you for joining me on this journey through The Bluest Eye. If you found this summary meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more immersive book summaries here on Reading Hours. Until next time, keep reading and keep reflecting.